What's up, college sports fans? I'm Stucky.
I'm Colin Wilson.
I'm Mike Calabrese.
I'm Maria Marino.
I'm Charlie DiSturco, and we're excited that the Big Bets on Campus brand is launching its very own YouTube channel.
You'll be able to find every episode of the BBOC podcast, live shows, and other college sports content on this new channel.
Not only will the channel be dedicated to betting on college sports, but you'll also be able to find exclusive interviews with former college athletes,
college football power rankings,
and updates on other topics like the brand new College Football 25 video game series and the ins and outs of the recruiting trail all the way down to the transfer portal.
Whether you're into college football,
college basketball,
college baseball, or any of the college sports,
we are the home for college sports, and BBOC is the channel for you.
Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the action. I'll see you there.
Hello, you beautiful degenerates, and welcome to Links and Locks, the Action Network's golf betting podcast. And this week, instead of breaking down a tournament preview, because there is no tournament, we're recording this on Tuesday, September 3rd, before the President's Cup teams have been announced. So we're going to do our little season recap of the regular season and the playoffs. The season's not over. We still got the FedEx Cup fall, and we'll be here to break down every single one of those 8 events along with the President's Cup. But we're going to talk about some hits, some misses, and some thoughts on the golf courses as well, and players who impressed us and players we're looking forward to, and any futures bets that we have or are eyeing for next season. So without any further ado, let's get it started. Nick, what was your best bet of the year?
All right. It wasn't my most profitable bet, but I think in terms of like with that putt on 18 and the final round of Sunday at Augusta, had some better bets overall, but just I think the price we got compared to what my model had was fantastic. I'm going to go with Ben on top 20 at the Masters plus 280, where he got it, I think, draining like a 21-foot putt on 18 to get inside the top 20 there for me.
Beautiful Benny on. Spencer, how about you?
Roberto, I wanted to come on the podcast today and say Steven Yeager in Houston. Like, we've obviously, all 3 of us have shown him a lot of support on this show. I kind of thought that if we look at the biggest edges in the market, probably for the last 2 years, it was Yeager, who was one of those more substantial marks, but it's really hard. And it's the same answer I'd give last season if this question was asked of the golfer that we're talking about. It would be Wyndham Clark when I hit him at 100-1 at Pebble Beach. It was a little bit because of it's the second time that I've had him at triple digits. Obviously, I had him at the US Open in 2023. I also think it's how that tournament played out. He fires a 12 under on Saturday. He surpasses Oberg by a shot. And then we play this rain dance waiting game for 24 hours trying to get the tournament called. And the tournament ends up getting called, and Wyndham ends up winning at 100-1. So, it takes a lot for somebody to surpass Jason Day on my, whatever we want to call it, power ranking list. And Wyndham has done that. So it would be Wyndham for back-to-back years there.
Prior to recording the pod, I hadn't seen that he had slipped all the way down to 100-1. That was probably the in-pod play of the year for me, tailing you on that. So thank you to Spencer, and thank you to Wyndham Clark. Also, shout out to Steven Yeager and Davis Riley being the only 2 guys to beat Scotty Scheffler after he switched to a mallet. That's kind of ridiculous that it was those 2 guys, especially considering what happened to Yeager after the win. It was pretty ugly. But my best bet of the year, I think by a mile, was Nick Dunlap at the Barracuda. It was the same week as the Open Championship, but I told you on the pod, I felt really strongly about him. I would have bet him at 25-1, and he had slipped all the way down to 45-1. So we got him for 12 units, had a couple of buddies who messaged me that they tailed, and it's cool to win money on your bets, but it's even cooler, I think, to have other friends win money as well and see their tickets and see them rejoice as well. So that was a blast. All right, fellas, let's keep it moving. What is your biggest bet regret of the season, Nick?
I had room on the card at the US Open. We had seen Bryson play so well every time he came on the PGA Tour at these majors. The Payne Stewart thing, like everything lined up to back Bryson there, and I didn't do it. I'm going to go with missing out on Bryson at the US Open.
Spencer?
I mean, I think it's funny, Nick and I, maybe funny's the wrong word, but it's an interesting answer that Nick and I are going to go in the same direction here. Like, when you think of your biggest bet regret, I think a lot of people would consider that question and go with something that they actually made a wager on and lost. And I think Nick and I are very data-driven everything has a statistical reason behind it. Like, we're not necessarily going to be upset by a losing bet. There's a process that comes into play there. You're going to get the high end marks of it where it goes well, and you're going to get the low end where it doesn't. For me, the most frustrating bet was definitely one of the two, and it's probably more so the Open Championship version of it, of not betting Xander Schauffele. I talked all season about Schauffele being a legitimate 1B threat to Scottie Scheffler. I talked about him. He's a major championship caliber golfer. He wins the PGA Championship. I bet him in 2 majors this year. I didn't bet him in 2 majors this year. If we're having this segment on the show, I'm sure everybody out there can guess which 2 I had him in each front. But that number had drifted out at the Open Championship, unfortunately. And for one reason or another, with some of the trending data, with the way it was looking, I decided to pivot off of him, go on the Colin Morikawa. So that was a very big regret of mine.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment, Spencer. I had Colin Morikawa and Patrick Cantlay among those that I chose to have on my card instead of one Xander Schauffele, and that did not work out for me. Moving along, who is the golfer who changed your opinion of him the most, Nick?
I'm gonna go back to Bryson again. I think that, like, in terms of like DFS and just seeing him in the 20-1 range coming into this season, like, I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't really believe in his game personally. I think a lot of people too in the space kind of thought like he was a dork, for lack of better terms, right? And like, not even like golf game. Like, clearly we knew he's addicted to like being great at golf, and I trust that now, especially moving forward. We'll get into that with the futures, but what he did for his personality, doing the YouTube stuff, like, I still think he's a little bit of a dork, but he's a likable dork now. And I just think overall, in general, I came into the season like wanting nothing to do with Bryson. I was all about John Rahm for my live guy. I think Bryson's a great person to watch. I think he's going to be great for the game of golf. And I think the PGA Tour and whatever else out there, World Tour and Live, like, together they need to find a way to get this guy on TV on more weekends, because it will grow the game. Kids will do stuff because Bryson's doing it. With the growth of YouTube and everything that he's doing, Bryson by far is like the guy that changed my opinion on him the most. And again, not necessarily from a skill standpoint, but just overall golf, what we do, watching it every week. Bryson was an easy answer for me there.
I think Bryson is a great answer, and he is a true character, and he does things differently. I think that's really fun to watch, and definitely miss being able to follow him on some feature groups on a Thursday, Friday morning. Spencer, who changed your opinion of him the most?
Nick kind of answered my part of the question with what he just said. So if we look at John Rahm, I think this was a very damaging season towards his legacy because, one, he's a golfer that year in, year out is competing to be the #1 player in the world, win major championships, have all those high-end results that we would want to talk about. But all of a sudden, he transfers over to Live. We don't see him week in and week out now. And it kind of goes to what Nick just talked about. Like, I'm not so sure that even of the Live golfers, I would argue that Nick is correct, that Bryson is the one that the PGA Tour needs back more. So I think this was a bad year for John Rahm's legacy. I think it was a bad year for John Rahm's support in the market. Like, he's not necessarily the most popular Live golfer at this point. So it doesn't mean that this can't change, but with each passing day that is occurring right now, and Scottie Scheffler just running rampant on the PGA Tour, winning event after event, like, unless Rahm can get back onto the PGA Tour and find himself to be the true threat to Scheffler, and I don't know when that's going to happen anytime soon, I just think that this has been a bad season for Rahm.
Yeah, Rahm can still get as hot as anyone. And Spencer, I thought we had a good bet on him to win the Olympics, and I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to come back on him at some point next year, with there being so many great opportunities for him, starting with the Masters. So we'll keep an eye on Rahm. And of course, there are a couple Live Golf events coming up in the next few weeks as well. Golfer who changed his opinion, who I changed my opinion of the most, probably be Ben On. Started off really hot with that playoff loss at the Sony Open in Hawaii, and made it all the way to the Tour Championship for the first time in his career this year. Been around for about a dozen years on the PGA Tour, at least in the vicinity of the PGA Tour. And just 2 years ago, he was on the Korn Ferry Tour, and he had always been one of the worst putters on the entire PGA Tour. He still was below average this year, but he wasn't horrible. And with the way that he drives the ball and his iron play, really stood out to me this year as somebody who emerged that I didn't see coming. after he was once again on the Corn Ferry Tour just 2 years ago. Moving along.
If we're sorry, just really quickly, Roberto, if we're talking pure golf, I think Aaron Rai also has an argument to be made from a statistical strokes gain standpoint. We also saw that improvement with the putter where he actually became good for portions of the season, worked himself into the Tour Championship and inside of the top 5 of my model in expected strokes gain total this year. So it was a big turnaround for Aaron Rai's game.
Love it. Let's move it along. And who is someone you're most excited to see in the fall, Nick?
Going through my results week by week before doing the show and seeing like the end of year tally and everything, I had a lot of action on a guy that you and I talk about. You played junior golf against him or with him a couple times, Mac Meisner. I think that out of the young group of guys that didn't really like make a huge name for themselves, but continuously popped, I think we have like 7 top 20 finishes and a couple top 10s, pending, you know, some of those events like the Barracuda Championship. Not a great field, but in terms of like guys like Davis Thompson, we talked about last year, how he kind of checked every single box. He's long, he's accurate, great iron player, good wedge player, can make putts. Like that well-rounded golfer that seems to be the guys that are consistently finishing inside the top 20 in majors, like a guy like Tommy Fleetwood. He fills it up everywhere, just can't seem to win. Mac Meisner seems to be that guy for me that I'm really interested in seeing taking it to the next level. I would, you know, like with modern golf today, distance means so much. That's maybe like the only box he's not really checking. He is average off the field and distance off the tee. I think, you know, with all the speed training and everything in social media, like someone's going to get in his ear to probably do that. He is relatively well in size and he's a strong guy. So I do think that Mac Meisner, with how good his iron play was this rookie year, his wedge play is fantastic. He's a great putter. He's accurate off the tee. I think Mac Meisner is definitely going to be a name to keep an eye on this fall that we'll probably see in the mid 20, mid 30 range in outrights, assuming that these fields are kind of lacking talent, and someone that could really make a name for himself next year on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, totally co-sign that one. He's a guy who's at least 6'3", 6'4", and you would figure he's going to figure out a way to hit the ball farther, and he's got the rest of the game to contend already. So
That's right.
Definitely keeping an eye on him. Spencer, who stands out to you entering the fall this year?
I'll give a 2-part answer. So I don't know how often we're going to see this player. I know he's playing in the Pro Court Championship. I'm excited to see Luke Clanton. I know he's going to be starting school back up, and I don't know how many starts he's actually going to get. So he's a name that the sooner he gets on the PGA Tour, I would say the better. We've talked about all these live golfers and not having the best players on tour every single week. Clanton showed very early on in his career. It was like very similar to that Tom Kim, Ludwig Oberg. There's an extreme talent that is with his game. The other name that I will mention is Nikolai Højgaard. If Nick talks about distance and long iron play and everything like that, I thought Højgaard entered this season as a top 25 player. He certainly didn't perform under those standards, but because he struggled as much as he did during portions of this year, I believe he's inside of the 80-something range right now for the FedEx Cup standings. So we're going to have to see him in action. And, you know, I hope we can get some of that statistical data that points towards the high-end marks of his youth, not what we've gotten more recently with him. Because, you know, Nick mentioned how you win a major championship is you have those qualities of distance and long iron play. And Højgaard possesses that as well as any of these young talents would.
Not sure how much Højgaard will be playing on the PGA Tour this fall. He's 82nd in the FedEx Cup standings, so he'll definitely keep his card. He might be playing on the DP World Tour, and there's some great events over there, so we'll definitely see him. I'm just not sure
That's
where.
fair.
And also, his brother Rasmus is 12th in the DP World Tour standings. The top 10 golfers not otherwise exempt. Some of them in the top 10 are already PGA Tour players like a Rory McIlroy. So the top 10 not otherwise exempt onto the PGA Tour get a card like Matthew Pavone and Robert McIntyre did last year. They both won on tour this year. I think it'll be exciting to see both Højgaards on tour next year, and I think it's going to be very probable. Also, Luke Clanton, no need to keep your Saturdays open for Florida State football because their season is basically over. The player I'm most looking forward to seeing in this fall, Kevin Hugh. He lost strokes with his irons in his last 4 starts. I'm ready for a little restart. Ready to figure out if he can find some Aaron Rai magic with the putter. And he started off this year really hot with top 10 finishes in 2 of his first 3 starts, one of them at the Amex, one of them at the Farmers Insurance Open, had another one at the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches, but then only one other finish better than 20th, and that came in an opposite field event. So you could put a little asterisk by that one. He went cold, hopefully we can buy low on Kevin Yu sometime this fall, whether it's to win or a top 10 or top 20 if you don't buy his putter. Moving along, gentlemen, who is the golfer you're most intrigued for in 2025? So not just the fall. Nick?
I mean, it's kind of a chalk answer, but Ludwig. I think let's get his knee cleaned up. He's just so good. That swing is so repeatable. I think that sky's the absolute limit for him. That's an easy answer for me. I think that's a guy that could push Scotty in this sub 10-1 range every single tournament.
Love Ludwig. He is uber talented, as we know, and seems like a great guy, and he plays fast. Love everything about Oberg and wish him the best with his knee procedure. And hopefully we get to see him sooner than later. Spencer, who are you looking forward to seeing in 2025?
So of the last 39 majors that have taken place, how many do you guys think were won by a first-time champion of a major?
Ooh. 25.
I think, yeah, I would say a good bit, actually.
That's a good guess, Roberto. It's 23. So you're right, spot on in that range there. And I think when we look at first-time players that have an opportunity, Nick mentioned Oberg. He would be the number one option on anybody's power ranking list there. You have Victor Hovland, you have Cantlay, you have Fleetwood. There's a bunch of names that make sense if we're looking forward to 2025. But the name for me outside of Oberg that I would be the most intrigued about that has the potential to just catapult himself in the superstar talent range of everything that we're talking about there would be Sahith Theegala. I've talked a lot already on this show about that combination of distance, short game mastery, par 5 scoring. Like there's a very specific blueprint that comes into play at these elite tests if you want to actually find high end production. And if I'm trying to be intrigued by somebody, I want somebody who can win a major championship. And I think Theegala is often an overthought commodity when we don't compare him next to a lot of these names. Like we're going to get to a question later of who's the most underrated player on tour. I would argue that answers Theegala also. I'll give a different name for the sake of this show, but I think Theegala's upside is tantalizing compared to what the market and the public tends to think of him.
Can we in-pod play Theegala future right now? Because I think Spencer couldn't be more right. In terms of like, if you still have your model up, like his total driving from last year to this year is just unreal. Like he does check every single box. I think that's a fantastic answer.
We've got futures coming up later, and I have one on Theegala, so we'll circle back to him.
I do too. So.
All right, we did not coordinate this, by the way. This is all just happening. Golfer I'm most intrigued for. Ludwig was on my short list. Jordan Spieth is number one for me by far. He just wasn't himself. I think over the last like dozen to 15 events, he did not have a single top 20 finish. Already announced that he's having the wrist surgery. Jordan Spieth, when he's on, is one of the most electric golfers to follow. That's why we generally have him on every time he's playing. He's generally in feature group or marquee group coverage on PGA Tour Live. So I'm very excited to see Jordan Spieth back to full health next year. And honestly, I'm a little disappointed that he just didn't get the surgery earlier on. But with the way the schedule works, it makes sense. And you want to give yourself major chances because you only have so many. So don't blame him, but very much looking forward to seeing Jordan Spieth next year. A couple of the guys who stand out to me, Victor Hovland, weird year for him. Excited to see what kind of form he comes back with next year. And then Michael Thorbjornsen, the PGA Tour U valedictorian, not 100% this year, dealing with some back stuff, still showed out, I think, tied for second at the John Deere Classic. When he gets to 100%, watch out. Very intrigued to see what his ceiling looks like. Moving along, what were your 3 favorite courses on the PGA Tour regular season? And the playoffs majors are not in the discussion here. Nick?
I went with Castle Pines. We talked about that a lot going in the BMW. I think that was an awesome course to watch. I loved how it kind of showed its teeth late after the first day in the scoring there. I was like, all right, maybe this course isn't what we thought it would be. And then it really, really turned on the boys on the weekend. I love that. Muirfield Village. I feel like Jack's always making changes to that course, making it harder. That tournament is incredible to watch. It usually comes down to the wire. I love Muirfield. And then I hated that this year is like the limited field no cut thing because I feel like this has historically been one of the most profitable courses that I've wagered on is Riviera. So maybe we can figure that whole thing out with these no cut events. You can actually get, at least 100 golfers in the field. But yeah, Riviera is probably number 3 for me.
Love all 3 of those. Spencer, how about you?
I definitely have a West Coast bias with my answers. Like I almost went 3 California courses across the board. I ended up just going with 2. I love Pebble Beach. That has always been historically a course. Like I hit Burger there a couple years ago. We talked about Wyndham Clark this season. I love Riviera Country Club. Everything about the looks and the way the course plays, and there are so many unique risk reward holes. It's a very good venue. And then as much as, and I'm not going to give this answer, as much as Torrey Pines gets hated on because of the redundant nature of what gets asked of that course, I love the scenic views for television there, but I'm going to go with Quail Hollow. I think Quail Hollow is just a pristine venue, and every single time, obviously we get it in major championships here and there, same with Pebble, but I think Quail Hollow is one of, if not the best venues on the PGA Tour.
We'll be talking a little bit more Quail Hollow later on in our future segment, but my 3, number 1, TPC Sawgrass. Love the course. Love that it doesn't really favor one specific type of golfer. And it's pretty ridiculous that Scotty Scheffler became the first ever repeat champion there this season. Love the dramatic stretch down. Love the back 9. I think that's probably my favorite 9 holes on the PGA Tour. Another one I loved, Pebble Beach. In the past, haven't been able to get many of the best golfers in the world there because they don't want to deal with the Pro-Am. And also, when you do have, in prior versions of Pebble Beach, you've had a course rotation with 1 or 2 other courses. I like that we were able to get more golf on Pebble Beach and see that course more often this year and have it in the signature event where you have all the best golfers. So that was awesome. And it's going to be another signature event next year. Was hoping we get to see that final round in the crazy weather, but obviously it worked out for us having a Wyndham Clark ticket, but hopefully we get some wind and sideways rain next year for Pebble Beach, because the course is too short to not have wind in order to challenge the best players in the world, like an Open Championship course. And then my 3rd one is Riviera. Absolutely love Riv. Even though it doesn't have really any water on it, I still think it is a tremendous test. And Ludwig Oberg noted during the playoffs in a press conference that was one course where he said that being a rookie really was not an advantage, because you got to figure out where you can miss, where you can't, and the angles of the golf course, and the fact that there is no water, it makes it a little bit tougher because you don't know where that miss can't be. And then sometimes the sight lines can be a little bit challenging if you're not familiar. Honorable mention to Castle Pines as well. Those 4 really stood out to me. Futures bets, guys. Any of them that you have made or are eyeing? Starting with you, Nick.
Yep, I will. They're all for the Masters. I don't really look at the foreign courses yet, or I haven't dove into Oakmont, but I'm sure Bryson's probably going to be one of the favorites there. But all right, I got Bryson 24-1 at the Masters on DraftKings. I think that or on FanDuel, I'm sorry, 18-1 on DraftKings. I feel like that price is as high as we'll ever see it. I think especially too, if he starts the live season in good form. It's a guy that should be 15-1 in my opinion. So I found value there. Theegala, after Spencer talked about it, started scouring. I see 90-1 at Augusta, already has a top 10 there. And like he said, like this guy, the sky is the limit. I think for like his downside, I guess, would be accuracy off the tee, even though it got so much better this year that I feel like that fits Augusta, well for him. And he's already had the course history. We know it's a very predictable course. I'm still riding my guy JT, 40-1 on DraftKings. I think that's probably the highest that price will get. If he starts the season well, I think he could fall down to the 30s, maybe the mid 20s, just because he is kind of the full package when his game is right. I think that's a guy that's also going to be like that addicted to success mentality that we talk about with some of these athletes in general. He is going to figure out what's going on with his putter and make that iron play consistent like it used to be. But his driver was a weapon this year, and I think that Augusta's a great course for him. And then the last one's kind of a prayer. I went in Minwoo Lee 100-1. If this guy could figure out mid to short iron play, like everything else in his game is just phenomenal. So I think that there's too much upside for a guy at 100-1 again with the course history that we kind of looking for at Augusta. But with that, I will leave it to you guys. I appreciate you having me on. It was a fantastic season. My total was a little bit it's disappointing. I had some bad weeks, but had some great weeks. I think Spencer helping me out at Pebble Beach. That was the second most profitable week for me, but my total was plus 4.83 units. And I think just the downfall of the top 40 market was just was a killer for me. So I got to hit the drawing board and figure out another market that I could find a significant weekly edge on. But other than that, it's a great season, boys. I appreciate it. I'm excited to dive into the President's Cup here once those teams are ready to go.
Thanks for hopping on, Nick. It was a blast working with you this year, and can't wait to do it next week for the Pro Court Championship. Spencer, any futures for you upcoming?
I do like Nick's call of Bryson DeChambeau in that anywhere in that 20 to 24 range is intriguing. Like Bryson is getting overly knocked, in my opinion, for the lack of historical course history that we have seen at Augusta. Last year was the first time that we've actually seen him work himself up the leaderboard. And you can make an argument that a lot of that came on day one. And he's done that in the past on day ones of the Masters, and it's fallen apart worse than he did. He kept it together much better. But I do think Bryson's upside, we've always thought, and it just has taken so long for the pieces to get put together there, that Augusta should be the prototypical setup for him. And some of the short iron play has been what's been lacking, but it was an improvement with his game last year. We saw it across the board in 3 of the 4 majors. I'll throw out the Open Championship. That was one of those events where you could almost go across the board of like Rory and Fleetwood and a bunch of guys that you would have expected to find success who did not. So just a wonky tournament there. But I think that Bryson bet is very intriguing from Nick. I'm going to tail him on that one. And then I've talked about Theegala. Theegala at 90 to 1 at the Masters is a very interesting price because, you know, Nick talked about the wide open layout, and the one detriment to Theegala's game can sometimes be his lack of consistency with the accuracy when it comes to the driver. And you give him this wide open nature to where you have to score on par 5s. You have to have short game creativity and mastery. I always run this article every single year. It's called the 7 Deadly Sins, and it's the 7 things that you have to do or cannot do, whichever way you want to look at it, if you want to actually capture the green jacket. And I put those numbers in. I was trying to figure out, as of this moment, who are the players that are the most likely. And DeChambeau was one of those names that landed. Theegala was the long shot option who was on that list, who survived all 7 of the criteria marks. So, you know, I think Theegala is only getting better. We saw it a little bit, and unfortunately probably had the wrong mentality, Roberto, because at the Tour Championship, the fade of him, and Lowry was fine in the fade that I took. The fade of him was with health, with Theegala. The upside marks like Theegala there. I worry about his wrist. The wrist has always been the problem just because of the extensive nature of that issue that's come into play in the past. And I thought he looked fine. And maybe it was just something that for whatever reason, the putter went south for, 2 or 3 weeks, and now he's back on track again. But if we want to talk about explosive golfers that can put the pieces together, it's kind of the reason why Theegala has been the poster child for this show of a golfer that I'm really excited about to see where he moves forward entering 2025.
And if his name was Patrick Reed, he doesn't call the 2-stroke penalty on himself in the bunker, and he gets the OWGR win this weekend as well.
Yeah.
Love Theegala. I bet him on this podcast in the fall in a futures bet, 100 to 1 for him to win the Masters. I'm going right there again, 90 to 1, as we mentioned on FanDuel. Not going to beat a dead horse, but love him there. Also, Quail Hollow, it's very well documented that golfers who have a right to left ball flight excel there. Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele have been among those who have dominated there, and they both have that ball flight. But you could be a righty who draws the ball, or you could be a lefty who fades the ball. One lefty who fades the ball, who absolutely loves that golf course, who grew up in North Carolina, is Akshay Bhatia. You can find him at 175 to 1 on Bet365 to win the PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. He has noted that it's one of his favorite golf courses in the world, and I like his chances there. I'll also probably bet him for a top 10 or top 20 whenever we get the chance, depending on the number, of course. But very excited for Akshay Bhatia, who's still just 22 years old. Pretty ridiculous that he's been so successful at such a young age already. I think that's all we got for my futures. I'd also say I'd bet Theegala down to 70 to 1. And just for reference, bet him at 100 to 1 last year. Of course, he played poorly, so it was great CLV until Thursday afternoon. But he closed between 40 and 50 to 1, depending on your book. So just framing that there. All right, Spencer, last question, or we got 2 more for you. Who is the most underrated golfer on the PGA Tour?
I used to think this answer was Russell Henley. And now, if you ask anybody this question, it seems like they scream it from the mountaintops. Data Golf went out and put him as I don't know the number. Maybe you know it, Roberto, but top 12, 15 sort of golfer. I don't know where he currently sits right now, but I think that sentiment started ringing true with a lot of people of, yeah, Russell Henley. Well, even more insane based off of that. But like, that's kind of my point. It's like, something like that happens and all of a sudden the narrative changes. I'm going to say that if we're looking at a golfer who actually has, and for a lot of these answers, Roberto, I'm trying to find high end major championship sort of winners that don't necessarily get viewed in that sense. I think Sam Burns is a lot closer to the elite names than, like, he is often viewed as, this is not a shot at Cameron Young. I think Cameron Young is a great young golfer who's, for whatever reason, fallen flat on his face this year. But I think people view him more in that Cameron Young sort of a range of like a golfer who, yeah, he's fun, he has upside, but he never really puts the pieces together. To me, I know Burns hasn't necessarily up until this season found major championship success, but we've gotten a little bit recently from him. He's had some results where he's had a chance entering Sunday and it just hasn't come together. I think 2025, if you want to look at another golfer to look forward to, if you want to exchange some of these names and flip flop them in certain directions, I think Burns is right in that Thagala answer of real upside for 2025. And we're talking major championship sort of success there.
Spencer, you copied my notes. I had Burns and Henley there. Henley obviously is insane, but 7th on Data Golf, I don't think people realize that he's been that elite. He doesn't hit the ball very far. Got to follow him for a few holes on Sunday in our feature group action, and he kind of next a couple drivers out there, 275. But once you get him off the tee, he's world class, especially on Bermuda. So obviously with the PGA Tour starting off in Hawaii, everybody's gonna want to bet him at the Sony Open. Everybody always does. But keep an eye out for him, and he's a sneaky play at places like the Masters, and he's had success there in the past. But Sam Burns really stood out to me as a guy who feels like this is like Max Homa last year, where finally tasted a little bit of success at the majors, got his first top 10 at Pinehurst at a major championship, and then was in either the final group or the penultimate group. I think the penultimate group on Sunday at the Open Championship after he fired one of the rounds of the day on Saturday. I know a lot of people said it was fraudulent because he got the best wave of weather that day, or the better wave of weather that day, and then everybody really struggled in the afternoon and they came back to him. But as we've noted, he bombs the ball. His putter can get as hot as anyone else's. There's a lot of Wyndham Clark there, but his iron play has historically been really solid, and it wasn't even the best that it's ever been this year, but he's absolutely got the upside. And compared to who I think his peers are, he's always a tier or two below in terms of odds. And so that was how I kind of wanted to quantify this. And there are going to be opportunities to bet Sam Burns next year. So I'm very excited about that. All right, Spencer, last question. What is your favorite closing hole on the PGA Tour, or what's among them?
I'll go back to Quail Hollow, the 18th. I think that entire Green Mile stretch, you get this very diabolical 3-hole stretch between 16 and 18. 18 is one of the toughest closing holes that you're going to get on tour. Quail Hollow does, like I mentioned this for the course, my 3 favorite courses. Quail Hollow does a lot right in my mind. So that 18th hole is always one of my favorite to watch. It's must-see television every single year.
I like 2 archetypes for my closing holes. Brutal par 4s like that one at Quail Hollow, and also par 5s where you can make anything from an eagle to a double bogey. And so a couple that stood out to me, obviously the 18th at Pebble Beach, you got the ocean right there. You can't beat the views, and you can also make an eagle there, but if you blow it right, there's out of bounds, and if you miss left, there's the ocean, and you can be right back there again. The Valero Texas Open, I think, was a great hole where it's not easy to get there until you really got to hit a great first drive. Otherwise, you could still make birdie, but you got to be on point with your wedges. And then I also like the 3M Open, where you got to kind of thread the needle and keep it close to the water on the right side if you want to have a really quality opportunity at an eagle. But also you can play a little bit more conservatively, take less than driver off the tee, and still give yourself a great opportunity with a wedge for a birdie. So I like the par 5s. I like that there can be a little bit more scoring volatility, especially if there are chasers playing in the final group. So those are some of my favorites. Spencer, thanks again for hopping on. Where can the people find your work this week?
Yeah, you can find me in general at Tee Off Sports. I always have all my in-tournament action over at Action Network. You know, Nick talked about where he landed this year with his bets, and it was a little bit of a smaller total than I'm used to that I put together. It was a really hot start to the year that seemed to go cold at a certain stretch over the last couple of months there. About 10 units of profit. I was up 13 and a half entering the Tour Championship. Lost a couple units there, have to add it to the total. So it's going to probably be sub 10 units there. But, you know, it's one of those things with golf. It's profit at the end of the day. We're always trying to increase our bankroll. It was still a profitable season when all was said and done. It's not necessarily the year that I wanted at the end of the day, but I think there's a lot to be said with golf and with the way we're moving and with these courses. And we keep getting these changes in the reconstructions. And there's something to be said about that, of how it changes the data. So, you know, we're going to keep pushing forward with it. I think overall it was a very successful year for all three of us. And just want to thank everybody who does tune into the show and makes us a part of their weekly research process.
It was an absolute blast doing the show, and we're not going anywhere. We'll be right back for the Pro Core Championship, formerly the Fortinet Championship, the Fries.com. It's bad, a lot of names, but it's out there in Napa. Sahit Digala, our guy, is the defending champion, so hopefully we'll get to see him there before he takes off for the President's Cup, because he was one of the automatic qualifiers for the team. So very excited to see him play him very soon. And who knows, Max Homa might be there as well, as he won the prior 2 years in a row. You can find me on Twitter or X at Roberto8213. You can find Nick on Twitter /X at SticksPicks. That's Sticks with an X. Thanks again to everybody for tuning in, both today and throughout the season, and for everybody who makes this podcast possible, especially our producers, Matt Mitchell, David Payne, and Noah Niederhofer. Thanks again to those guys for all their help throughout the year and their collaboration. And of course, thanks to you, the fans, for tuning in, and we hope to see you guys soon next week as we start the FedEx Cup Fall.